They crowned him with laurel, and he crowned himself with thunder. He spoke like a god, judged like a storm, laughed like a blade dragged across marble. Rome learned a new prayer under him, not for mercy, for survival. They thought madness was a rumor. Then the executions became theater, and Rome became the stage. This is the story of the emperor who ruled like a god and killed like a demon. They crowned him with laurel, and he crowned himself with thunder. The Senate performed its ritual, robes arranged, faces polished, voices trained for gratitude. But their eyes were wrong. They were the eyes of prey that had learned to smile. Trumpets rose like a prayer Rome wanted to believe. A new dawn, a gentler hand, a boy emperor kissed by fortune and lineage. Yet power loves an empty room. It fills every corner. It learns the echo of its own name. He felt the room bend, felt the marble listen, felt the distance between command and consequence shrink to a single breath. They said the omens were good. Birds flew right, entrails agreed, the gods were satisfied. But thunder does not ask permission, it only looks for a sky. In that charged silence after the cheering, he smiled, not a child's smile, not yet a tyrant's, the smile of someone tasting the first drop of a storm he could finally call his. Rome applauded for hope. He heard it as surrender. And somewhere beneath the curia's perfect floor, a crack, invisible and patient, began to grow. A crack that would one day split the empire's spine. At first, Rome remembered how to breathe. Taxes eased, games returned. The baker's tray grew heavier and his jokes louder. Children chased pigeons through sunlit arches. Merchants argued over silk and salt as if politics were a bad dream. A veteran lifted a cup to the sky and said, "Maybe the gods are tired of being cruel." He smiled for them. He waved from balconies. He poured gold into spectacles until the crowd's throats were hoarse from gratitude. But mercy, when it's strategy, has a clock. And clocks, when they run out, sound like doors locking. In the villas, whispers traveled on cool evening air. Generous, charming, not like the last one. Whispers are soft until they are notes, notes until they are hymns, hymns until they are certainties. And yet, even the happiest song can carry a dissonant thread, a tremble under the drum, a warning string stretched too tight. He watched the city bloom and learned a lesson. If you feed Rome, it will kneel. If you starve it, it will crawl back to your table anyway. Evening by evening, he practiced the art of being adored, and found it delicious. The calm did not break with a shout. It thinned, like a veil over a blade. And behind that veil, the blade was already moving. Illness came like a spear in the dark. A breath that wouldn't finish, a fever that wrote its own scripture across his skin. Doctors crowded the doorway, priests burned incense until the room was a temple to desperation. Pledges were made to every god that would listen, even to the ones Rome no longer believed in. In the corridors, power paced with its sandals off. Who inherits a storm? Who teaches a nation to keep its voice down? Then, morning. A bowl of water. A cloth. A breath that finished. He woke and the ceiling seemed closer, the world smaller, the distance between his will and Rome's spine gone. There is the gratitude of surviving, and there is the hunger of someone who has peered over the cliff and learned he can fly. He smiled new, sharper, a coin with edges. Those who had prayed felt relief. Those who had prepared for vacancies felt fear. Those who knew him best revised their definitions of the word mercy. When he stood, the oil lamp flared, the way flames do when air rushes in, or when a room decides who it belongs to. The spark was not his survival. It was the conviction he brought back with him that gods do not ask, they announce. And his first announcement was coming. Rumors grew legs, then teeth, then wages. He learned to pay for whispers, and Rome learned to earn by listening. A senator's servant overheard a joke that sounded like a plan. A cousin remembered a comment that felt like treason when told in the right tone. Wine made allies brave, and mornings made them careful. He loved lists. Names written in tight columns, ink drying like verdicts. A city of marble reduced after midnight to paper. Was there a real conspiracy? There is always at least one, but paranoia does not need a map. It draws its own. Walls lean in when fear is profitable. Curtains learn to hold their breath. Even statues begin to look like witnesses. He spoke of purity, loyalty, a Rome trimmed of disloyal branches. But pruning can become sport, and sport can become policy. By torchlight, a city rehearsed a new grammar. Speak less, nod more, keep your laughter on a leash. And those who forgot the new grammar were about to be edited out of the story. It began without trumpet or law, a carriage at night, a door that didn't open again. Trials became theater, evidence a prop, verdicts a monologue delivered to an audience trained to applaud. Nobles vanished. Clerks learned which ink to spill and which to swallow. Heralds practiced neutral faces. He discovered that fear is the quickest road through a crowded city. People move aside for it. They build shrines to it and call them institutions. One morning, a name was scratched off a tablet. That afternoon, a villa changed ownership. By evening, the city adjusted, the way a body does around a wound. Witnesses rehearsed the new truth, that law is a rumor repeated at the emperor's pleasure, that justice is a costume sewn to his measurements. And still, the baker sold bread, the chariots raced, the bathhouses steamed with gossip no one would ever admit to hearing. The first blow is not the loudest. It is the one that teaches a city how to flinch. And Rome was already learning to duck. The treasury groaned under the weight of his appetite. Gold poured into spectacles, palaces, and offerings. Offerings not to Jupiter or Mars, but to himself. Temples found their statues missing heads. In their place, his own face, polished in marble, smirking under the incense. He spoke of uniting Rome under a single god, and then made it clear that God was already sitting on the throne. Priests bent their prayers to his name. Those who hesitated learned that hesitation was a sin, and sins in his Rome were punished swiftly. Treasury doors opened like arteries, pouring coins into games that no longer celebrated the gods, but the god emperor. The people watched, awestruck, some in devotion, some in dread, and many in a silence too deep to be loyalty. A storm doesn't need to arrive in rage. Sometimes it begins as a crown of laurel that refuses to come off. The Senate tried to restrain him not with swords, but with ceremony. They offered counsel in long, careful speeches. They buried warnings in layers of flattery. They hoped tradition might tether him to reason. But tradition is just another chain. And he liked the sound of chains breaking. He mocked their oaths, interrupted their rituals, called their laws suggestions for mortals. In one meeting, he tore up a decree before it was read. The fragments landed like snow on marble. Rome doesn't need parchment, he said. It has me. The room sat frozen, and in that stillness, they understood a god does not debate. The clash wasn't swords against shields. It was pride against the kind of power that no longer listens. In the markets, voices dropped. In the taverns, songs lost their endings. Rome was learning to speak without saying anything. Merchants hid their wealth in walls and under floors. Parents taught their children to bow before they learned to read. Every glance became a question. Did they see me? Did they hear me? Am I still safe? Masks sold faster than bread, not for plague, but for politics. The city kept moving, but like a man walking past a sleeping lion, careful, measured, avoiding the eyes. And in the palace, the lion was awake, and wondering why the city had gone so quiet. He decided fear was useful, but humiliation was better. Punishments became performances. Accusations announced in public squares. Sentences delivered with a smile, as if cruelty was an act of generosity. An enemy might be made to crawl before the crowd. Another forced to watch their fortune auctioned coin by coin. Every act a lesson. Defy me and you will be more than destroyed. You will be remembered. The applause was never honest, but it was always loud, and he counted it as worship. Spectacle became the empire's new religion, and he was its high priest. He declared himself divine, not in poetry, not in jest, in law. Temples were ordered to honor him as they would Jupiter. Priests were told to replace their prayers. Those who hesitated found themselves replaced entirely. He stood in the temple of Castor and Pollux and demanded that his statue be carried there to stand among the gods. Not among, he corrected, above. The air in the forms shifted. Even the marble seemed to stiffen. Rome had endured emperors who ruled like men. It had survived emperors who ruled like tyrants. But now, it faced one who ruled like a god and killed like a demon.
In the early days, proximity to him was a prize, an invitation to dine, to walk the gardens, to stand near his chair in the curia. These were badges of survival. But in the later days, proximity felt like standing in the shadow of a lightning strike. Friends began speaking in halves, as if the rest of their words might get them killed. Family stayed away for weeks, then arrived with offerings, unsure if the gesture meant safety or danger. A senator once laughed too loudly at a jest. The next day, his house stood empty. Even the marble bust in his atrium had been taken, as if to erase the shape of his face from Rome itself. The Praetorian Guard still stood at his side, but they had learned the art of stillness, never reacting, never betraying thought. Only their eyes told the truth. They were weighing something. He sensed the distance growing, and he welcomed it. Fear, he decided, was cleaner than friendship. It required no compromises. Rome had been taught that safety lived close to the emperor. Soon, they would learn how wrong that was. Betrayal is not born in a single night. It is a slow infection, spreading through conversations no one remembers starting. Senators met in corridors with too many exits. They spoke in metaphors, testing each other's courage without saying anything that could be repeated. The Praetorian Guard, sworn to protect him, drank in shadows after the watch changed. They counted the men willing to act. They counted the men too afraid to say yes, and the men too afraid to say no. No one trusted anyone, and yet trust was exactly what was required. The emperor still spoke of loyalty, still played the god in public. But in private, the walls felt heavier, as if they were listening and taking notes. It was not yet time, but the moment was coming, and when it did, Rome's applause would sound very different. It came dressed as celebration, a performance in the theater, crowds in their finest robes, a city pretending the air was not heavy with expectation. After the applause, the invitation was made. Come behind the stage, Caesar. Meet the actors. He accepted. Why wouldn't he? Gods do not fear corridors. The sound of the crowd faded, replaced by the muffled echo of boots on stone. The torchlight narrowed, the walls leaned in. In the shadows ahead, men waited. They did not stand like actors. They stood like doorways. One step too far, and the script of the evening would be rewritten forever. The god was walking into his final act. The first blow was disbelief. The second was proof that gods are only men with better costumes. The laurel crown spun away across the floor, its leaves scattering like birds from a storm. He shouted, not in command, but in shock, as if offended by the suggestion that he could be touched. Steel found him, again and again. The divine mask split, and beneath it, only flesh. The conspirators moved without speaking. Every thrust a vow that he would never rise again. When it was done,
The corridor fell silent. No prayers, no cries, only the sound of breathing and the faint roll of a crown that no longer belonged to anyone. The god was gone. The demon was gone. But Rome still had to face what it had created. The theater emptied in waves. First the whispers, then the footsteps, then the messengers running in all directions. Some wept as if a father had died. Some smiled as if a debt had been forgiven. Most simply kept their eyes down, as though the air itself might record their reaction. The Senate moved quickly, rewriting the last years into a cautionary tale. The Praetorians cleaned their blades and spoke softly about loyalty, as if it had always been to Rome and never to him. But outside, life kept moving. Bakers opened their stalls. Merchants shouted prices over the noise. Children played games in alleys that had seen blood only hours earlier. Rome had watched a god bleed, and once you've seen that, you never look at the altar the same way again. The city exhaled, but it was not relief. It was the gasp before asking the most dangerous question of all: who takes the throne next? The blood in the corridor was barely dry when the second list was written. Not of the guilty, not even of the suspected, of the inconvenient. Those who had been too close to him, those who might seek revenge, those whose silence could not be trusted. The Praetorian Guard moved swiftly. Doors splintered before dawn.
Names were scraped from wax tablets, as if the people themselves had never been born. In the palace, rooms were emptied. In the city, shutters stayed closed. The streets grew quieter, not from peace, but from subtraction. Rome had killed its god. Now
It was erasing his apostles. Justice, they called it. But justice was only a mask Rome wore when it didn't want to call something revenge. Trials were staged, but the verdicts had already been signed. The witnesses were there to perform, not to testify. One by one, those connected to him were condemned. Some were stripped of rank, some of property, some of life. It was not about punishment, it was about cleansing the memory of a reign that had been burned into marble and blood. Rome pretended to put him on trial after death, but the truth? The city was judging itself and found itself guilty. The throne room was empty. Its pillars stood like sentinels guarding nothing but shadows. The laurel crown lay on the cold marble floor. It had not been moved. No one wanted to be the one to pick it up. Outside, the city hummed with a forced normalcy. Bread was sold, ships unloaded their cargo, but every sound felt slightly off, as if the rhythm of Rome had been disrupted. A god had fallen, but the weight of his absence was heavier than his rule. History is not written, it is argued. Some called him a monster, proof that power corrupts absolutely. Some claimed the rumors were exaggerated, that his enemies had sharpened their knives with lies as much as steel. In scrolls and speeches, he became both villain and victim, a mirror in which Rome could see whatever it wished. But one truth remained. Whether he was god, demon, or man, his reign had left stains that no rewriting could wash away. The stories outlived him. That he made his horse a consul, that he ordered the sea to be attacked, that he turned executions into banquets and banquets into executions. Were they all true? Perhaps not. But in Rome, a story repeated often enough becomes a monument. And his monument was built from fear and maintained by fascination. Strip away the marble, replace the togas with suits, and his shadow still walks among us. Leaders who see themselves as gods, crowds who clap on command, institutions that bow instead of stand. The faces change, the stage changes, but the play is the same. And every audience learns the same truth. A God who believes in nothing but himself will demand everything from everyone else. The laurel crown is beautiful, but it cuts when you wear it too long. Rome's warning to the world is carved not into stone, but into memory. Call it madness if it comforts you. Call it evil if it helps you sleep. But understand this: madness and evil only ruled because Rome handed them the keys. And someday, when you see another crown lifted high, you may want to ask, what kind of hands are reaching for it? If you've come this far, you know Rome's shadows run deep. There are more stories waiting, stories they tried to erase. Click and step into the next one. And if this tale gripped you, like, share, and subscribe. Every click keeps the fire burning, and every share makes sure the Empire never forgets. Like the story, hit subscribe, share it so the Empire remembers, and keep watching. The next reckoning is waiting.